welcome to day 5, putting it all together. This is my art journaling table, so I thought I'd show you how I set up my art journaling station so you can have some idea how you might set up yours. So I made the camera go back a little bit so you could see more of my table. On my left is my basket of selected collage papers that we're going to use, and of course the art prompts and the intuitive art journaling reflection sheet. I'm going to use, I usually use the gloss medium. It's a little more fluid for thinner papers, and I like to use the heavy, super heavy gel gloss for the thicker papers. And I have a little water spray. I have my paints. I'm just going to be using very minimal paints. Those are the Liquitex Basic Fluids. I use the same in Mars Black and in Titanium White. My water container, my brushes, my drawing tools where I like to activate the substrate first, my brayer, and my palette. I like to use a glass palette, but you can use any kind of palette you wish. So when I usually approach, I'll show you some ways. I've been drawing out 8 by 10 on a 9 by 12 larger Canson. I'm going to be using in my demos in this lesson a smaller one, but I just thought I'd show you that. And this is where I came up with the idea of the self-reflection sheet. Because if you're looking through your journal and you want to remember, oh, I really like that, what did I do? Of course you can slightly, you can see and guess, but rather than guess, only by reflection and is how you're going to grow as an artist. Learning, paying attention, reflecting, and then moving forward in your practice. And showing up on a regular basis is very important. So as you can see, just orange, yellow oxide, black and white, and the collage papers are made from the same colors. That's what I mean by cohesive. So it's very easy to put things together. And of course, your high contrast, low contrast, and your black and white. So this would be an all over composition. Here's another one. You can see where I've put the 8 by 10, working in standard, just in case things do turn out, you love them. You can see the finished line with pen. Here's one more, which is much darker. And of course, my notes on the left. We're going to be working with a slightly smaller version where I'm not going to worry about taping off. And also this non-coil watercolor pad. So let's get started. So my selection of possibilities was a very high contrast with the Lego piece. This piece that I've been showing lots, which is a very multi-layered piece. My dashes with pastel. My hexagons. Here's some nice high contrast transparent pieces. I like to select a couple of those. Very strong pattern. My circles, that 3 different pattern, and if I might use a piece, I might not. And of course my big circles, and maybe this multi-layered piece. So I just put them in the basket beside me where I can select them. In this session, I just want to explore different types of layers. So that's my intention. And that's what I would write down. I would write today's date. I'd start off with a positive. I am expanding in my creativity every day. for instance, and then words or messages, my intention for this page today, and then afterwards I would remember any specific sequences of layering, what materials I used that day, and the colors I explored. I always love just getting into just a peaceful stillness, quiet, not rushed, and I just like to just activate the page from maybe some of the marks that you did or the lines that you explored from day one. But don't, this is where we're not referring to any notes at this point. We're just going with the flow. We don't want to think. We don't want to overthink. We just want to respond. And you want to go off the page and maybe apply different amounts of pressure. Just explore. Thinking direction, but we're not thinking, we're just responding. So it's hard to explain that. Okay. So I'm thinking, yes, I do. This is a water soluble, so here's my waters at the side right here. I'll move it over so you can see it. And I just dip that in. And I love that it's so soft compared to what I already used. So when you first start exploring an art tool, you're still getting to know what it can do, what its possibilities are. So I already know what that graphite, water-soluble graphite can do. So I want to just smudge it and soften it some more. And I like this gray. And I have no intention. This is not pre-planned for this course. I'm just going along just like all of you. I'm really liking this subtle gray wash. Okay. So as I continue with this first page demo, Intuitive Layers, I love to start with and find it easier to begin with drawing. I love the drawing elements, and this is a good way to keep exploring your different art tools and the marks that are unique to you. So I'm spraying some water, really getting into that water-soluble graphite layer, and then I let it dry and use the dryer, of course. And then here's my scratchy brush or craft brush, and it is wonderful while you're using the dry brush technique. And you might have a session where you just do that alone. So especially if you're new to this process, it's great to do that. So right here, I'm just demonstrating when you have a high contrast layer of any kind, look how the transparent collage papers really, they really come to life when you have a high contrast underneath. So in the end, I did choose my circles, and as you notice, there's 4 there, and right now I'm using that intuitive placement. You'll get better at it as you go, and it's great because you don't have to commit. You can just move your collage around, and the center left is the spot that it felt right to me. Of course, it's going to feel different for everyone. And you see how I crop the one on the left, so it makes that left forward, that eye motion going to the left. And I'm using the gloss medium here because it's a little more fluid and better for the thinner papers. That encyclopedia paper that I show or use, your deli wrap paper, tracing paper, or any, it's just a more delicate, and then it's so great as it just sort of disappears and more of that contrast, that high contrast layer shows through. So keep exploring the different combinations of marks, high contrast, and in this way, you'll learn lots as your voice starts to show through. So as I continue with more pencil lines that were inspired by the graphite wash that was there, and I just thought I'd follow the angle, so I'm really trying to stay present and just respond to what's there. I love the graphite, the soluble graphite, and I need to explore it some more. So balancing always, and I love to go diagonally across most of the time. So I thought I'd zoom in so you can take a look. And there's lots of interesting layers. I'm loving the scratchy brush, wide lines. And I thought a great contrast would be a stencil. And my favorite, organic dots by Stencil Girl. I usually buy 5 or 6 or so at one go, so you might want to try those. They're the most interesting ones, but Amazon and other places have good stencils, but just use what you have on hand. So you can overlap and keep going and keep exploring different layers. I like to use the stencil, so I'm putting it in the other direction, balancing the other side. And I'm loving the tiny dots, which are very different compared to the bold, large line that I just put there. So coming in with, after that is dry, the veiling with the white, transparent white from Liquitex is what I love. And you can change the angle of your color shaper, or use a Catalyst wedge, or even use one of your gift cards, whatever you have, to just put in a very thin layer. And notice I'm not covering the whole area or the line, just sections of it. And I'm loving how those dots are now over top that line, and that line is way in the background now, so depth is happening. So I would usually come in with a black, a stronger black on top, but I thought, well, let's just try something different. But because the transparent white is very low in opacity, so you need to experiment with opacity and transparency with your paints too. Just experiment with different brands, different types, and just keep going. So because there was a little blue on that stencil, it gave me the idea of, why don't I try a light blue, which then I added a little black to just make it more interesting. And adding a touch, a very tiny amount of black to your colors really changes their effect. So coming in with some more veiling, but with a neutral, that off-white, whatever you have on hand. And I didn't want to go over that graphite layer, but notice that now this is where these shapes start happening, because you're playing with positive, negative space. So I veiled the negative space there. And now that I've added a little bit more there, you can notice that collage piece, which is very transparent. And you could use an art tool, any art tool you wish, to create your contrast. I love, on top of this 4th or so layer, using stencils. You could even add more collage, like the hexagon, the black one there that on the left, that would have looked interesting. But watching your ratio, how much, your size, your scale. And once I know I'm at these dots, it's time to stop and move on to the next one. So here is another way that you can approach starting an intuitive art journal. This is the Canson, the 140-pound watercolor paper, but it's slightly smaller than the one I usually use. Since it's already small enough, I don't feel it necessary to tape the edges, because I want to just I don't want to have to think and waste tape and do all of that detail. I just want to start right away. So what I like to do is, just to protect the previous page underneath, I just put a piece of newsprint underneath like so. These are your art prompts from the download. I have the original ones right here. This is yours, and you can print them out on cardstock, cut them out, and put them in whatever container you can or you have to draw from. And so let's give it a go. So my first pick was One Big Collage Torn, and I could have used those dots of the text page, but I chose the smaller, newer piece that I added. I just resonated with it more, and as you can see, I'm using intuitive placement, and I choose to use the heavy gloss for my thicker papers. So most of the time I put it on the back and don't touch the substrate. And then I use a decent layer on the top because I don't want the paint soaking in. So my second draw was charcoal marks. So as I say here in the captions, I didn't have charcoal on hand, but I wanted it to be black. So I just chose a pastel piece and made 2 fast marks, trying to be spontaneous. My third pick was pattern, and I already chose my transparent papers for my pattern, so I knew right away what I was going to use. And I'm trimming the edges off of the deli paper, and just because it leaves it that way all the time because of the size. And I'm really loving anywhere on that side would have worked now that I see it, but overlapping your transparent collage papers is a really cool way to use them because you can see that piece coming through. It adds that subtlety. Loving the hexagon and those spaces in between, and you can see the marks from the previous layer continue at a diagonal to the lower right. So next was an opaque layer. So I could have chose just the neutral, but I just wanted to see what that yellow oxide would do. It's fairly opaque, so I wanted it to be more opaque, so I'm adding a neutral, and it is fairly opaque, and I like what it does to that layer. So I'm just playing around with my color shaper. You can too, and this is a great way to get used to what your tools can do. That's an awl that I love to use, and of course I had to dry that layer. So scratching through, which I already did, so I'm going to do it again even though the layer is almost dry, and you can also use the back of any paintbrush or art tool. You don't need an awl. Veil something. It can be translucent. It doesn't have to be opaque. To me, veiling is just adding a thinner layer. And I love how when you veil, it pushes things back. So right there with my hands, I'm showing you, I'm going to put it in there. And I'm putting at a slight diagonal, but I'm not covering everything. I spritz it with a little bit of water, and notice the angle of my color shaper is more of a 90 degree, which will remove more. So then you can put more on, switch back and forth until you get it just right. And of course, I had to use my dash lines collage piece, and I put it in the bottom left so it would counterbalance that yellow oxide opaque layer at the top right. And I think I'm really loving what's happening. And if you chose to finish up with some gold, and what I usually like to do is just echo some of the lines that are already there and just add one more layer. And that's all I will do. When I'm done, when it's dry, I'll turn it over. I will write down the order of these art journaling prompts so I can just remember that mindset and add any notes to maybe make this hue a little stronger. It's a little weak, but that's okay. You can always come back in later. And all of those neat things. Make more of this kind of collage. It was a gestural collage. Love this pattern. And then on to the next one. So I hope you enjoyed that way of starting your intuitive art journaling practice. This is another way that you could approach your intuitive art journaling practice. I've been getting into timing myself at different increments, some at 20, and the more challenging one is at 10. Of course, I'm going to speed this up, but it is going to be just 10 minutes. And so as the clock is running 10 minutes, I'm trying not to think about it, and I'm just responding and decided to use the Carpenter pencil just for something different, my China markers. I'm just having fun doing different marks, not really having time to think much at all, just grabbing and doing what I already know. So I like this paper the most because it was the strongest rather than starting with something light. So I'm trimming off the edges, placing it down, and using intuitive placement to find the right spot. So noticing that these two pieces, it tucked under is okay, but they're too equal in size, and that's only from hindsight. But that's what you want in order to move forward with these little exercises. So you would write down those notes, making sure you have a distinct difference in size. Then I went for the paint because I don't just like using collage. I like combining, so that's why that's my favorite is mixed media. So found the little piece there of that sort of turquoise bubble paper, and put the other one up on the top, sort of balancing it off, I guess. Continuing with those lines that are already on the collage and just creating another layer with drawing marks. Using the China marker for my vertical black lines, and I knew any kind of transparent or translucent collage paper would work here, knowing that those lines are underneath. So getting that color shaper working, and you will have bubbling, etc. on these quick experiments, but they're really easy to fix, and I don't really worry about them at all anyway, because they're just explorations. Just love my small brayer, how it makes this really cool line, and you never know what kind of pattern is going to happen. That was 10 minutes. And it's so funny. So I'm finding less is more, and using that echoing these lines and adding them on the other layer seems to work for me at this point. And I loved my little brayer thick, to make a thick line. So I would just... So this is another approach. Timing yourself, 10, you might find 10 too short. You might find 20 too long. You'll pick the time that just gives you that edge and forces you to respond. So this is another way to approach your intuitive art journaling practice. So I hope these 3 different approaches have inspired you in some way. And before you begin your intuitive art journaling practice, remember to keep it simple and focus on a few key pieces, 3 to 5, that resonate with you, and aim to really let go of thinking. So remember, there's no rules, There's no mistakes. Keep exploring, playing, and discovering. Your creative journey is just beginning, and I can't wait to see where it takes you next. I'll be seeing you in the Facebook group. Happy creating!